Cake for All says, you know you'd still buy it, John, the F1 game. And this is the really disgusting thing, is obviously I like the Formula 1, and unfortunately I also collect Formula 1 games, so I feel obliged that I have to buy it no matter where it comes from, and it's pathetic, and I hate it. Because John, I will probably buy it.
Guys.
It's just the same as, like, you know, if I want full coverage, if I want to watch the race in real life, I can. Sky TV have the monopoly on that, so I have to pay Sky £90 a month because I have to have the sports channels, and you have to buy all of the sports channels just to get the one sport you want to watch. It's disgusting. But we do it because there's no other options. Violins in the chat for John. Yes,
violin.
Thank you.
This is where John has a conversation with himself with the count things like, this is disgusting. I hate it. I think you're a terrible person. And he's like, is this 60 quid you're handing me, sir? Yes, take my money and give me my game. Well, I hate every minute of it.
60 quid, 70 quid these days, mate. 70 quid for standard editions these days. But our questions of the week. Each of us, as usual, has submitted a question for each other and the chat. And we're going to do Bill's question first. Bill, would you like to read out your question of the week?
My question this week is it important to play classic video games? Who's going first on that one?
I'll go first, I don't mind.
Go on in, John.
I would say it is not important to play classic video games. I suppose it depends in which context the question is being posed. But I think if you're, say, you know, if you're a young kid now, you don't need to play the classic Marios and Sonics to appreciate the new ones, but you certainly would have a much better overall viewpoint on the games that you play and the industry as a whole if you are aware of the history of it. I think it would certainly aid your appreciation of your hobby that much more. I don't think it's essential, though.
Yeah, I would agree with John. I think it's a bit like, is it necessary to read classic literature? Not really. If you are interested in that or you're interested in the history, like, yeah, sure. I just don't think that classic video games are really required for enjoyment of a modern video game. Like, that most video game franchises have something on a current gen or at the very least previous gen console that you can play, and you almost never see, like, 8-year-olds saying, Daddy, can I please play on the SNES?
Doesn't happen.
Do you? So, yeah, I kind of agree with John, which is rare.
It's I think it depends on what kind of gamer you want to be, because some games and styles that have died a death are a result because they haven't made a good transition into modern times. And there's many kind of games that are still good to this day, in my opinion. But they don't. It's going to be very difficult, nigh impossible, for them to take that franchise or that game and bring it into modern day or make anything better of it. Plus the fact, I think there is a certain enjoyment in playing some of the older classic games for things like Smash Brothers and its lineage, and so you can see where all these characters have come from to be part of the conversation. And I think I posed this question because I didn't like Final Fantasy as a series. I hated it for years, and I started, the first one I played was 7, and I went through and played them all because people were questioning the fact that you don't know what a JRPG is. So I went back and played the first Final Fantasy and played them through, and because of that I actually enjoyed the series more because I now understand where all the references and things come from and how it's built its way up. So I think, it's, like you say, John, it's a difficult question to sort of answer because you've got to see where it comes from. Is it important to enjoy games nowadays? Probably not. Might even be worse.
Some people don't play games to enjoy them, though, do they? Some people play games for the competitive side of it.
Or to feel superior.
Yeah, or indeed the basic thing of just feeling superior, which is, that's a discussion we've had before. Not all games are enjoyable. For example, if you're going to play a Soulsborne game, there's nothing fun about that. There's nothing fun about that at all. But the satisfaction comes from the act of completing a section of the game. People have different requirements from their games. Having said that, though, I think it would be bloody brilliant if you bought the new, I don't know, let's say, if you bought Demon Souls on PlayStation 5, but you put the disc in, and it says to you, you know what, you can't start this game yet, you've got to play the original, and then Dark Souls 1, 2 and 3, and Bloodborne first, here you go, and then we'll let you play your Demon Souls on the PS5. They should force you to play the old games.
Why is that? What makes you say that?
I just think it would be a fun thing to have. It's like, you're not worthy of playing this new game unless you've played the old ones. Here's a download code, go and play the old ones first.
Oh, brilliant. Let's feed toxic gamer culture
and then
even more.
when you finish the original, say, when you finish the Dark Souls 1, 2 and 3, you get a password, and then that password then unlocks Demon Souls on the PS5.
So you just want to troll people, is that what you're saying?
Or you buy the new Sonic, and it says, have you completed Sonic 1? And you go, no. And it goes, right, here's a code, you've got to play Sonic 1, and then you get a password, and then it lets you play Sonic 2, and you have to complete all of the history before it lets you play the new game. This is what Bill's Draconian Gaming World would look like. This is what I'd like to see.
John for president.
Yes! Why not? What did the chat think of this? The chat was saying people should just play what they enjoy, I think is the general gist of what everyone wanted.
Yeah, that's a fair enough point. I think that's the going back to the gaming toxic. To be honest, we asked this question a while back to me: is gaming culture toxic? After seeing what happened with Cyberpunk and Minecraft Steve and some other stuff that's been happening recently, I might need to change my stance because, oh my gosh, what people have been saying. But anyway, that's maybe for another day. But the elitists who go back and say you have to play them are just as wrong as the ones that say, oh, that's too old, it's not worth it. I feel sorry for people who can't experience what it's like to play Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat in an arcade. I feel sorry for people who don't know what it's like to hold a high score, things like on pinballs and Pac-Man games and things like that. Because there's a certain kind of experience that's left in that kind of era of gaming because it's been left behind. And I don't think, although you can get games that do similar things nowadays, and there's other ways to enjoy it, there's something that's now been lost through that classic experience from those games that is now missing. And yeah, I think what you've said, John, just a minute ago, you're absolutely right. If you want to be an e-gamer or a competitive online gamer, there's going to be nothing for you in the 90s and maybe even early 2000s. But there is a part of gaming we've left behind because people didn't give some of the classic games a chance.
Maybe what they should do is, you've got all these different, towns and stuff around the country. What if you could have something like a coffee shop, and in that coffee shop you could have like a selection of games of all ages, where people could come and experience games from all different genres and all different ages, and see the different variety of things like that. So you could come in, you could either play your Fortnites or whatever, or if you wanted to, you could experience some classic stuff on the NES or the SNES and stuff like that. Imagine if there was a place you could go to that offered you all of that under one roof for the low price of £2.50 for an hour. Wouldn't that be great?
I think that would be a really great idea, but I wouldn't waste your time on getting a Dreamcast because no one will play it.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah. Or a NES for that matter. Anyway, where were we? Where were we up to? It leads on quite nice, actually, to Ash's question. What's your question, Ash?
So my question is, are retro games really that good, or are people blinded by nostalgia? And I'm going to clarify here that I'm not saying just because a game is old, it's bad. What I'm saying is, compared to modern gaming, do the limitations of previous generations of games affect the enjoyment for someone playing it nowadays who may be used to autosaves or better graphics? And the people who are like, just to use an example that I know is going to upset people, just to be like, the people who are like, Final Fantasy VII is better than the remake because it's original, are those people blinded by nostalgia and unwilling to see where, gaming has gone?
I have an answer.
Go on then.
There are many amazing retro games which, regardless of whether you played them at the time or whether you played them for the first time now, they are amazing games. Things like Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, all that typical kind of stuff that you see on the, newly released retro collection consoles and stuff. However, as good as those games were, and always will be, 75% of all of the other games that came out at the same time are very much forgettable. Because just as much as there is now, you get loads of great games and you get loads of rubbish games, it was just the same, back in the 80s and 90s, there was loads of great games and there was plenty of rubbish games. So, whether all games are bad inherently, I don't think so, because good games are good games forever. And that is the reason why you get, remakes and remasters, because of the nostalgia for those good games. You generally don't get remakes and remasters of crap games that everyone's forgotten about.
See, I think that's a good point, I think the people that say, all retro games are really good, they only remember the games that they thought were good, and not like the NAF games, like Pop Hills.
Pop Hills? Right. I can see you in the chat, and you. Pop Hills, if you don't know, is one of the greatest puzzle games ever released on the Game Gear in 1989 or something, or whenever the Game Gear came out, 1991, something like that. I bloody loved that, and it was part of my childhood. I know it's not a fantastic game, but it holds up today. It's a good game. Check out Pop Hills. You can even just Google it. There'll be some web-based game version of it that you can play.
That's the interesting thing about this question, is why I love this topic, is because I often wrestle with the fact that I love talking video games, but I try to keep my nostalgia back, because I played games since I was 4 years old, and I often ask myself the question: do I like this because I'm being nostalgic, and what does it mean to be nostalgic, or am I actually being accurate in my review?
I think it's a question you can't actually answer for yourself, because the nostalgia blinds you.
Exactly. However, when it comes to these games that they were doing back there, again, there's a part and there's an aspect that I think game developers have lost. And as you said at the beginning of your question, where you said, I'm paraphrasing, so sorry if I've misquoted you, but you said that because of the lack of the power of the game. And the console, the results of it worked the other way around as well. When I listen to how these old games were made, because of the restrictions of the hardware they had, specifically designed how the game turned out, because they couldn't deliver what they originally planned, and there was no patches, there was no graphical enhancements they could do necessarily, but not always the case.
No delaying after it's been released.
That kind of stuff. They had to say, right, well, Mario is an easy example. The creators of Mario wanted Mario to ride a dinosaur in the first game, couldn't get it working. So they shelved it and came back to it later.
Well, he's only got a moustache because they didn't have enough pixels to draw a mouth.
That's right. So they were being inventive and said, right, well, we can't do this, what can we do? So they moulded the game around the aspects, and from that you get some incredible creativity. Nowadays, with games that are released, because they don't have those restrictions, I find that they will just go with those original visions, and you just think you're losing some of that creativity and what you could potentially do. Not always, because again, you don't have a broad spectrum or a cage, so therefore you could argue that you have more creativity. But I think that game development really excels when you go, okay, that's our destination. Oh, we've got to take a sidetrack. What can we do to compromise to still get there, and what can we create? And I think from that, some of the classic video games are a lot more creative than they ever would be or could be than nowadays, because of the result.
Valid points.
No arguments.
No, that's fine. I'm going to swiftly move on to the next question. Is Nintendo as evil as the rest of them?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, I also believe that.
You've done this to spite me, haven't you, John?
Nintendo are a game publisher, the same as
And
everybody
you're
else.
insulting the man and the god, the myth, the legend.
No, I'm not saying I don't like Nintendo, and they do make some of the greatest games that have ever been made, and continue to do so to this day. And they probably have, like, you know, in terms of longevity, they are, you know, the best. But at the same time, they are not this cutesy, happy company that is there to look after your family and provide you with wholesome entertainment. That's their marketing department.
They just have
that
a
does
really
that.
good PR department.
Nintendo are as evil as everybody else. They are just like Disney. They're in it for the money, and I really don't like that they get away with so many re-releases, remasters, doing the same content, artificially high prices, all that kind of stuff. It really annoys me. But yes, I still buy the games. I know I'm a hypocritical gamer, but at the same time, they are evil.
But that wasn't your question.
Are they as evil as the rest of them?
Yes.
That was the question.
And yes,
In
the
fact,
answer I think is yes.
It's probably even worse because they have a better PR department, and they have this open, or they openly put across this, we're Nintendo, we're so nice, we're so lovely, we do cutesy games, you know, and then they do things like re-release games for £60 and, you know, like, charge people extortionate amounts of money and don't really do anything with their older games. There's no proper backwards compatibility or anything like that, because they know die-hard Nintendo fans, if they want to play that GameCube game, they already have a GameCube and they're just going to buy that game. And yeah, it's just really shady, and they have the so wholesome, so family friendly that I think it's probably worse. At least you look at Phil Spencer and go, yeah, he's a slimy man in charge of Xbox, isn't he? You don't look at, like, Reggie and go, oh, Reggie's obviously feeding me some Nintendo propaganda, because he's Reggie and everyone loves Reggie. So yeah.
That's a fair point.
This is a very tough question, because I think there's a few things that grey the lines more than you realise. Like, yes, they re-release games, but that's because people keep asking them to.
That's the thing of their defence, isn't it? Their defence is that they do legitimately make excellent, incredible games.
But they are also, like, I mean, if Sony was to do a re-release of The Last of Us Part 1 and charge you full price for it, you'd be really knocked off. But if Nintendo wants to re-release Super Mario Sunshine and charge you full price for it, everyone goes, oh yeah, but Sunshine's really good, so I'm going to buy it again for £60. That's the issue.
For the record, Sunshine's not that great.
But I agree. Sunshine is not that great, and when it first came out, everyone said Sunshine sucked. But now that they've remastered it, everyone's like, oh my god, Sunshine's amazing, it's my favourite GameCube game. And I'm like, is it though? Or are you just falling for Nintendo propaganda?
That game there is a perfect example, because they didn't announce it until quite recently, but the demand for it and the rumours for it and the people talking about it was almost 6 to 8 months in ahead. And they was like, announce it. You go on Twitter, you can see people just demanding it. So you've got to think, did they release it because the demand was there, or did they always have the plan to charge full price for it? And again, it comes down to, if that's what people want to do, they'll get it. However, there's also the other side of things where we haven't got an F-Zero game recently, and they've said the reason for that is because they can't make a different F-Zero game. The last one they made was the more up-to-date one they've thought of. They couldn't think of anything new to go in there.
But they're perfectly happy to re-release 3 Mario games.
Yeah, but again, that's what people are asking for.
People are asking for an F-Zero game, though.
But they could re-release F-Zero and things of that nature. I get that, but there's all the aspects of them trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, why would they do Labo if they thought that was going to, be a money-making scheme? Clearly, they thought it was a niche. I mean, if you're going to... Okay, I'm not proving my point right. Let me start this again. if you could do the Assassin's Creed FIFA kind of aesthetic and basically go, right, every year we're going to release Mario, Zelda, and a Smash Brothers game, and that's all we're going to do, they would rake money hand over fist. But they haven't done that. Instead, they try and do Mario Kart, the buggy ones, and they try to do Labo, and they do different types of things to try and keep the innovation going. So businesses are evil because they want to make money. That's the point of it. But it just doesn't add up that they would take those kinds of business risks if they were as evil as the rest of them, and they could quite easily just go, do you know what, that's the low-hanging fruit, I'll take that every single time, thank you very much. I don't see them doing that every time.
They do take the low-hanging fruit. How many times has like
Sometimes.
Twilight Princess has been re-released? What? How many times?
Twice.
But then how many other Zelda games have also been re-released? Because they're Zelda games. And the thing is, Nintendo knows that their fans are so committed. How many people do you know that are like hardcore Nintendo fans? They're so committed that they will buy the game anyway, whether they've played it on a previous console or not. And I think a lot of the innovation from Nintendo, the Labo, the Mario Kart Live, is because they know people are going to buy it anyway. Like, take Ring Fit Adventure, which outsold Breath of the Wild in Japan. Like, Ring Fit Adventure isn't something you would necessarily think would be that popular, and yet it was, and that's a Nintendo innovation. So I think Nintendo are just as evil as the rest of them, but they have this nice family-friendly, wholesome, like, way of putting themselves across that people are quite willing to fall for, basically.
I like this drama. Let's see what the chat says. Mistress Puff says, I wrote to Nintendo before I got married for a little something for our wedding day. They sent a card with a lovely note and a couple of bits of merch, so I love them. Kisra says, they're making some bad decisions lately. Their games aren't evil. Emily says, their support department is amazing. Reggie didn't accept the OLL party invite, though. That's a nice reminder from Cake for All. Yes, we specifically sent Reggie an invitation to OLL's second birthday party. We put it in a gold envelope and everything, and they didn't write back. So yes, they're evil. Please come to our 4th birthday party, though. And Kisra says, married the Mario All-Stars was a good deal for people who enjoy those games.
But that's the point, is it's for people who enjoy those games. They know people are going to buy that anyway.
Yeah. Has Nintendo released a current glitchy game? I suppose generally, yes, they are. They are better than most when it comes to the quality. They are the Waitrose of the gaming industry, says Mistress Puff. That's quite good, actually. I like that.
Is it evil, though, that they know that the people wanted that Mario game and they released it, whereas EA every year released the same FIFA game but just changed the name?
Whether you want
no,
it or not.
I think that's really evil as well.
But that's worse, right?
What? But then I'm like a really big proponent of like indie games, and I really don't necessarily like massive companies that try to have a monopoly. Like, well, Nintendo has a monopoly on Nintendo games, obviously, because they just don't share, and that is fine. They can do that. It's a way of making money. But I personally would rather spend my money on games that are made by a smaller developer that are going to go towards making different IPs, new games, better innovation, than buying an innovative game like Ring Fit from Nintendo just for that money to go back into like Super Mario Odyssey 2.
Well, here's another thing to think about. They got into mobile gaming, didn't they?
I need some popcorn.
They got into mobile gaming last year, and the first game they released was Mario. And they said to everybody, I can't remember how much it was. Let's just say a tenner. They said you can have the whole game for a tenner. The next game they released was Fire Emblem with microtransactions. Now Mario has always outsold Fire Emblem in every other scenario but this one, because the general public decided they would rather have microtransactions and buy Fire Emblem that way than they would buy a full-out game for. And they said, look, we don't want to release games this way, but we're at the end of the day, if the general public would rather spend money in small little bite-sized chunks like in Fire Emblem, Mario hasn't sold nearly as well as this game, and it's even fell by the wayside because Fire Emblem has dwarfed it. Is that evil, or is that just being a smart businessman?
But then you look at Mario Kart Tour though on mobile.
Well, okay. Yeah. All right, John.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's just a personal thing. Is I personally think that big companies like that, it's a capitalism thing, and I'm like a massive socialist, so I really am not a massive fan of it. So I think it's.
Can you have a business and can you be good? I guess is the question there, isn't it?
Exactly.
No, because you have to do what you have to do to succeed with your business, don't you?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I guess.